Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to the EduSat Network. Our topic of discussion today is the Vedic Times, and this shall be the last lecture as part of our topic that we have been ongoing and running for quite some time, talking about early Vedic times and tracing the transition to the later Vedic times. And we have this in our studio, our same subject expert who has been associated with this specific topic, Dr. Shankar Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Hindu College, University of Delhi. So with this, I welcome sir and also request him to begin to our today's lecture. Thank you sir for coming.
Thank you, Urvashi. Good afternoon, viewers. This particular lecture I intend to present as the last in the series of lectures that we have had on Vedic times. So obviously we shall be trying to sum up quite a few transformational changes that we spoke about in the previous 2-3 lectures that we have had on this topic. Particularly, we shall try to touch upon the political and also a little bit of social and religious changes that were registered in the period of transition from Rig Vedic to later Vedic times or early Vedic times to the later Vedic times, chronology for which we have already spoken of in our earlier lectures. Rig Vedic standing for 1500 BC to around 1000 BC, and the later Vedic period extending from around 1000 BC to around 600 BC, which is regarded as the terminal period for Vedic age or Vedic times. From there on, we come to the Upanishadic period and the period when the Brahmanical system of social and religious paraphernalia that we have so far been talking of underwent some kind of a challenge from several upcoming religious movements like Buddhism and Jainism. So this is going to be the scheme of our today's discussion, and let's try and pick up from where we had left in the last lecture. And I think we had spoken of the iniquitous redistributive mechanism that is slowly becoming important around the later Vedic times, and this is giving some kind of a differentiation in terms of economic well-being, in terms of say a structuring of society in the sense of what we understand as class. So that dimension of economic stratification is getting added to the we can say socio-religious status, which was the case in terms of different ordering of society in the Rig Vedic times. So if we think of the Brahmins, if we think of the Rajanyas, if we think of the Vishya, or for that matter even Shudra, who don't appear to be very significant in number or even consequence in Rig Vedic times, but we shall see as to how things unfolded. So what we are trying to say here, that if we encounter these nomenclatures in the early Vedic text, then we should not be thinking of some kind of economic stratification as well with reference to these categories, because essentially in the Rig Vedic times they are by and large socio-religious status groups in sociological terms, and that extra dimension of economy getting added to it, or economic differentiation getting added to these social categories, is something which gained momentum only in the later Vedic times, and it further intensified in the subsequent times. So as a student of history, we should accord this bit of sensitivity to the changing times, and whatever traits with which we tend to identify caste or Varna society today or at a later date in history is something that we should not automatically or by default attribute to Vedic times as well, because we have seen over the 3-4 lectures that we have had that these elements are not there to begin with so far as Vedic society is concerned, and it is only in tandem with several other economic and political changes, technological changes, social changes, organizational changes, political changes, that we find different traits of caste system or Varna Vyavastha getting added to this institution at different points of time in history. So that is the focus point that we should be very aware of when we think of Vedic times and the Varna hierarchy and so forth. So since we have already spoken of the some kind of iniquitous redistributive mechanism coming into place in the later Vedic times, where the top 2 Varnas or top 2 social categories, that is the Brahmins and the Rajanya, subsequently who were called Kshatriyas. So they come to a portion, a major portion of the Dan or the Bali which was offered, or for that matter even the war booty or the things which were captured as part of warfare, which was very frequent in the early Vedic times. So they are getting to a portion, a major portion of it, and the Vaishyas or the Vish, the common people, are not being reciprocated with the dan that they were giving to the sacrificial at the time of sacrificial occasions and so forth, but probably they are not getting equal amount in return, which probably was the case earlier, because there was a constant kind of pressure on the Kshatriyas or on the Rajanya, on the Rajas at sacrifices to give away something as a kind of reciprocal gift. So generosity was something which was expected of the Rajas on these occasions, which led to material redistribution in a rather equitous manner in the earlier times. But from the later Vedic times, we find that this is probably not the case, and we have already seen as to how, and we shall see today as to how Bali, which earlier was voluntary, increasingly is becoming still not a tax, a regular tax in the later Vedic times, because that was to happen subsequently, but certainly it had become no more, it had remained no more voluntary, and it had become more and more coercive. Now, around this time, around the time of the transition from early Vedic to later Vedic, we also find that the references that we get of the Rajanyas, they now change the nomenclature, so to say, and they are, Rajanyas are increasingly now being referred to as Kshatriyas. We have spoken about the connotation of this. Kshatriya as a term has its root word as Kshetra, and Kshetra means land. And we have already seen that land is becoming more and more important, not only from economic point of view, but also from political point of view. Because earlier, the king was supposed to be safeguarding the interest of the kin group as a whole. And there was a little element of the territory as the responsibility of the king in the early Vedic times. But in the later Vedic times, it appears that more than the blood group relation or the kinship relation, it is the land or the territory, it is the kshetra, or it is the janapad, the area over which the Jana, the common people, the tribe ventured. So that area is to be protected, and that is the chief responsibility of the king in the later Vedic times. So here we find some kind of a shift happening, and we have already seen the economic underpinnings of this with relation to the capacity of the land to produce with the advent of agriculture in a rather big way, and the gradual intensification of it and its implication for surplus generation, and with more and more surplus being available to the Raja, to the king, elaboration of the administrative mechanism or the administrative apparatus, so to say, became a possibility. So we don't see that it is some kind of a essential prerequisite. So it is becoming an essential prerequisite for the elaboration of state machinery or administrative apparatus. So that element is getting satisfied or getting fulfilled in the later Vedic times. Now, Kshetra or the land association with the king we have already explored. Also, we find that around this time the link between the Rajanya and the Vish was increasingly becoming oppressive and more coercive. Now, what is the implication of this? Why do we see these kinds of things happening in the later Vedic times? One, we have already said that Bali is now no more voluntary, it is becoming coercive. So obviously with the Vish, the common people who are the actual producers, who are the direct producers, now they are ending up in giving something in material terms to the Rajanya, who earlier were not that distinguishable from the common people or the Vish. Now it is an iniquitous relationship between the two in material terms and also in ritual and social terms. So there is this distanciation and there is this tension which is very much visible in the contemporary literature of the later Vedic times. Also, we find that with the emergence of the grihapatis or the individual house owners or householders becoming important unit of production, becoming a very important element in the entire organization of production, the way it was happening in the later Vedic times, there is some kind of a distanciation between the two. That is to say, the Rajanya and the Vish are now no more seen as indistinguishable unit because of direct production being under or being the responsibility or organization of production. Direct production is the responsibility of the householders, the grihapatis, whereas the Rajanyas are to do with warfare, providing security, and safeguard the territory or the kin group as a whole. So that is something which is visible, and this distanciation is resisted by the Vish. So there are some hymns which do convey this idea that it is not as per the liking of the Vish, that despite being despite them being the direct producers, they are ending up as the side which is always giving something and not getting the things in return as they earlier were getting. So that is one, and the texts also describe several rituals to ensure that the Vish did not abandon the Rajanya or the upper two Varnas altogether on account of this tension. So here we find that the rituals are coming up in a way to assuage this group, which is now resisting this kind of an arrangement where they end up giving something. So, this is the economic backdrop in which the rituals in the later Vedic times multiply. So, this is just one interpretation, and this is the way historians have sought to understand the economic dynamics behind the kind of rituals that we get to see, which are grand, which are not that occasional or which are not that frequent as they used to be in the Rigvedic times, but in the later Vedic times they are somewhat few and far separated, but wherever or whenever they used to be held, they used to be grand. And the participation, the entry of people was also somewhat restricted. So, it is a limited participation by the wish in these functions or on these occasions that we shall see. Ritual literature also emphasized that the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas sprang from common roots, and therefore, the wish is indispensable to Kshatriyas. So, this is just to overcome the real tension that is very much visible on account of iniquitous economic redistribution, and rituals are coming to some kind of coming as performing some kind of a function of gluing, putting all these components of society together, and that is the backdrop in which the rituals in the later Vedic times emerge. There are only occasional references to Shudras who at around this time might have included, say, artisans or laborers. Das and Dasis are also mentioned, but neither the Shudras nor the Das and Dasis appear to be very significant from the socio-economic point of view at around this time, and this is probably because their involvement in the actual process of production was only to a limited extent, and we understand this rather well on account of the limited agriculture that was being practiced. And we all know that agriculture is a labor intensive exercise, and with agriculture being very restricted or of a limited order in the later Vedic times, of course the significance or importance of these sources or this pool of labor is not that pronounced in the later Vedic literature. Subsequently, it does, and this increase in the significance of Shudras or the labor class, so to say, becomes intensified alongside the intensification of agriculture in the post-Vedic times, around 6th century BC and subsequently. So, captive source of labor, slaves, Shudras, or other forms of labor is of somewhat limited importance in the later Vedic times on account of the limited spread of agriculture, limited practice of agriculture. Therefore, what we were hinting towards the beginning of this lecture, that this element of economic stratification that we usually associate with Varna Vyavastha today or in the subsequent times in history is something which has not made its entry in the later Vedic times. So, till around this time, what we have as part of Varna hierarchy is only restricted to social and ritual status or social and religious status of different Varna groups. and economic component is yet not that important, or economic dimension of that stratification is we can say yet to crystallize in a big way to become very visible in these texts. Then also true, because this is also the time we have spoken about it earlier, that the Aryans are increasingly coming into contact with several pre-Aryan, non-Aryan communities and groups who were living in this area, that they are now coming to inhabit in the later Vedic times the upper Gangetic basin, and slowly also towards the end of the later Vedic period into the middle Gangetic plain. So while they are making these forays into these geographical zones, we find that quite a few pre-Aryan social institutions continued during this period as well, and that is something which is reflected in later Vedic texts as well. There are several matrilineal elements which are very much discernible in these texts, and one can make out that this is coming from these pre-Aryan groups, because we have already spoken of the fact that Aryans in the early Vedic times had definitely the patrilineal kind of arrangement, and with increased instance of matrilineal examples, of course one can think of this bit or this aspect coming from the pre-Aryan groups, or we can say non-Aryan groups who were living in this area already. We do get this evidence that in the Rajasuya Yagya, which is a characteristic feature of later Vedic times, which used to be grand and big, wives of the Raja was accorded a lot of importance, and this is again a pointer to matrilineality, or at least some sense of power which was vested in the females, in the wives and so forth. And even in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad we have several Vanshavalis which do show us that several seers bear metronomics, and so that again is a pointer towards the pre-Aryan practices which are getting amalgamated in the Aryan influx into these new areas. And we do get to hear of women seers in the later Vedic times like Gargi, Maitreyi and so forth, who are important. And of course, so there is this matrilineal aspect also making itself visible in the overall patriarchal system, which ultimately probably seem to have triumphed by the end of the Vedic times. However, we also have evidence or attempts to stratify society on gender lines, and that is something that was a reality in the later Vedic times. Overall, therefore, we find that in the later Vedic times we have a clearer indication of the emergence of distinctive socio-economic categories associated with specific functions and roles as compared to the Rig Vedic times. So this is a development which is dated to the later Vedic times. Also, several social formations associated with the Varna hierarchy, as we have already spoken about, related to agriculture and so forth, or economic connotation, emerges only in the later Vedic times. But we should not be led into believing that it was a certain kind of a development, because it happened over a long stretch of time. So it was a gradual development that we get to see. Now, in polity, or we can say in political terms, if we see, then the contrast is very much visible here as well. For instance, early Vedic political institutions, we have already discussed that they were essentially tribal polity that we encounter in the Rigvedic times. Raja of Rigved was not an absolute monarch, so he was only a leader in the warfare, and therefore the powers vested in the Raja of Rigved is very limited and occasional, and there is a functionality associated with it. Whereas we will find that in the later Vedic times it has changed significantly. The Raja in the early Vedic times was also expected to be generous, like all tribal kings. On the occasions of potlatch and so forth, he was supposed to give away whatever was received as dan or bali, or whatever he had come to capture as war booty in the raids that he conducted, that he led. So that was yet another mechanism through which the status of Raja, or the material aspect of Raja was kept at some kind of a check, and there was not much that the Raja had in terms of surplus or at his disposal. And therefore, the apparatus, state apparatus, or the political apparatus also did not have a very solid foundation to grow and multiply, and we shall see its ramification in the later Vedic times. We have also seen that the Raja is expected to look after the kin group and not the territory, territory, with territory becoming important, there is some kind of a change in the function and expectation from a Raja. Despite finding several references in the later Vedic texts, for instance, we have the reference of Senani, that is general, or the Purohit, the priests, the Gramini, or the village head, Spasas, or the spies. They are all mentioned, but we should not be led into believing that they constituted some kind of a formal bureaucracy under a particular ruler. So there is no formal bureaucracy as such, and the Raja might have been chosen by the wish or the Jan, and there is no regular resource to maintain a standing army. Raja had to depend on his wish, because it is the wish who constituted the militia which participated in these wars. So this was the scenario in the Rigvedic times in terms of polity. The assemblies that we get to see around this time, we have Vidhat, which is extremely important institution as an assembly in the Rigvedic times, and we also have Sabha and Samiti. Now Vidhat is clearly the most important assembly or institution in Rigvedic times, and men and women both attended Vidhat. It was probably also the center where disputes were settled. It also probably was the site of sacrifice that were made, also the site where potlatch or feasting was done as kind of reciprocal behavior on part of the king. This was also the site of singing, hymn singing, and redistribution that we have already spoken of. But we find that as we move to the later Vedic times, Vidhat as an institution falls into relative insignificance vis-a-vis Sabha and Samiti. And Sabha, which is an exclusive assembly for the elite, becomes more important or becomes more prominent. So does Samiti, which is a general kind of folk assembly, you can say, where the entire population participated. So there was not much restriction over here. And most important is that Raja's participation in these assemblies was something which was significant, it was expected. and the custom itself demanded that the Raja participated in these assemblies. Now, also visible in these assemblies is some kind of a stress on striving for dispute resolution, or we can say that striving for concord, some kind of a consensus building is very much there. That pressure was always there in the Vedic times on the kings, but in the later Vedic period, these obligations, these expectations are also ending, are also on wane, we can say. So, there are significant changes with respect to polity. We have sedentism, emergence of territorial state, we have already spoken about it. Chiefship is coming down, and it is the territorial aspect which is becoming more and more important. There are several hymns related to the origin of kingship for the first time emerging in the later Vedic times, and kingship originated out of need for a leader in warfare. A divine origin of kingship is presented in the form of Ashwamedh Yagya. Then Raja chosen by people who hoped for certain specific material gains in return and so forth. So, this constituted the way in which kingship was presented in later Vedic times, and we find that the nature of kingship is certainly undergoing a major kind of a change in the later Vedic times, and the rituals are trying to justify, are trying to give some kind of a justification for these changes in whatever ways that they could. Bali, we have already spoken about it. Despite not being a regular tax at around this time, certainly had become more stable than earlier, and earlier it was a tribute, voluntary tribute. Now it is becoming more and more coercive, and we have already seen that a major reason for this is because of the increased importance of agriculture. Certainty of agricultural production is also ensuring that the surplus generated is more and more stable. Now, if one has a stable inflow into the state coffers, then one can think of a systematic elaboration of the apparatus of the state. So, we are not saying that in the later Vedic times there was this kind of a formal bureaucracy in place, but there are inklings, these are the formative phases where changes on these lines are very much visible, and as we said, that the essential prerequisite for that has been satisfied on account of stabilization of agriculture in the later Vedic times. Raja is referred to in the later Vedic times as a Vishamatta. So, of course, it is an indicator to the oppressive exactions, oppressive kind of tenor to the gift giving, or what earlier used to be a bali. We also have spoken of the fact that iron tools are now at the disposal of the ruling class, and that could have significantly enhanced the striking power of the ruling class, and it could have ensured that they come to exercise this coercion in order to appropriate the agrarian surplus, which is more and more stabilizing around this time. So, but the overall situation is still having some kind of a cap, some kind of a automatic brake, in the sense that the surplus generation is not tremendous, and therefore there is some kind of a check on this, and this is visible in the rituals where the Raja or the Rajanya or the Kshatriyas are always shown as someone who can't dispense with the wish altogether. So the indispensability of the wish is very much visible in the rituals and several other paraphernalia around sacrifices and other social practices, or even references that we have in the later Vedic texts. So this distanciation leading to stratification, a stratified society of Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, that has some kind of a we can say check in the later, till the later Vedic times. Of course, with the growing socio-economic differentiation within the Jana, the perceptible decline in the number of references of these popular assemblies is very much there after the end of the Vedic times, and that signals the end of the common control or control of the common people on the exclusive powers of the ruling class or the Kshatriyas. That tells us that by the end of the later Vedic times, the Raja could become more absolutist in nature, because these assemblies, which where the formal bodies, where the control or where the presence of the common people was essential. So with these practices having gone, the Raja or the king in the later Vedic times, towards the end of the later Vedic times, could become more and more absolutist in nature, and that is something that we will see when we talk of the 6th century BC developments in our subsequent lectures. Also important is the fact that in the later Vedic times we have the emergence of the Janapadas, which were formed probably as a result of the amalgamation of various Janas. We have already spoken of the example of the Kuru Panchalas, where Kuru and Panchalas are two different Janas. They come together and there is a territorial connotation in the sense of these two being not only Jan but Janpad. So there is a territory identified with Kuru Panchalas, and we all know of the story of Mahabharata and the context that it provides to what we are saying. Also, this is the period where, as we said, rudimentary development of the administrative system is becoming visible. We have Ratnins, the 12 jewels during the Rajasuya Yagya, which can be counted as some kind of officials. They were not yet formal part of bureaucracy as such. There are references to kinsmen, there are references to charioteers who are generally present at the Rajasuya Yagya and appear to be indispensable for the Raja. So maybe that it is the elaboration of these elements which subsequently went on to give the shape to the formal bureaucracy towards the end of the Vedic period. As the Raja became less of a popular leader, he became more and more coercive. So the popular assemblies declining and the Raja becoming more and more absolutist and coercive. Then correspondingly or synchronized with this change is the elaboration of rituals to legitimize the Raja's changed position. So sacrifices like Rajasuya, Vajpeya, Ashwamedh enhanced the importance of the new ruler, and also the priestly category which is associated with it. So there is some kind of a manipulation of rituals to ensure supportive and subordinated role of the Vaishyas and the Shudras to that of the Brahmins and Kshatriyas that we get to see in the later Vedic times. Some references to Raja's position also start becoming hereditary. This is yet another change that we get to see in real terms in the later Vedic times, that the position of Raja is now showing the signs of becoming hereditary, and of course it had implication for the changed political structure in the post-Vedic times as well. In the domain of religion, we find that Indra, who was the most popular god as the war god or the rain god, the god of thunder during early Vedic times. We have epithets like Vrathan or king of Vrata attributed to Indra. We also have epithet like Maghavan or the bounteous one for Indra. And what is important for us to understand is that the attributes, the functions, the roles, expected roles of these gods are actually a reflection of the expected roles of the king in the early Vedic times. So, whatever is expected of these gods is something which is in real terms desired from the kings as well. And therefore, there is some kind of a peep that we can have vis-a-vis the gods' expectations or people's expectation from gods and the supposed role that the king was supposed to play. We also have Agni as important god in the early Vedic times, sacrificial fire as some kind of a means of communication between man and God. So, it was through Agni that the wishes were transported to the king, and also we have some kind of similar expectation that we just spoken of, that we have already spoken of. So, we also have Varun as the maintenance in charge of Rit, that is seasons, in fact comprising entire moral world or natural, including natural and physical worlds. So, Varun looks after the moral domain as a god. And there are very few references to goddesses in the early Vedic times. We have Ushas, goddess of dawn, and they are depicted in a relatively hostile way, which again is symptomatic of the patriarchal orientation of early Vedic society. And later day Hindu deities like Vishnu and Shiva, who went on to become extremely important in the postmodern times, are of relative unimportance in the early Vedic literature. So, they are not very significant gods at around this point of time, the early Vedic times. Mode of worship we have already seen is sacrifice, simple and communal participation is part and parcel of sacrifice, accompanied by communal feasting and drinking, somras and so forth are the details, very frequently recurring details in these sacrifices is the somras. And aim of worship is direct in the sense it appears to be in the early Vedic phase, it appears to be materialistic. So, something tangible is expected and not abstract, as was the case in the Upanishadic times. So, people are not expecting sukh or shanti as such, but they are expecting that I am giving you this in respect, you give me something very tangible in return. So, this is the way in which religion is transacted in the early Vedic times, whereas in the later Vedic period there is more elaboration of sacrificial cult, so that it became more specialized activity. And we have already said that these sacrificial instances now are not very frequent, and they are not held at a regular interval of time. Rather, there is a huge gap of time after which sacrifices are again held, and these sacrifices are now becoming more and more exclusive, but more and more grand as well. So, some kind of intensification with respect to surplus appropriation is very much visible here. And there is another tangent to these rituals, and that is something we have already spoken of, that still, since there was this kind of a material check on the authority or the possibility of the king having become extremely absolutist, therefore, there is some kind of a constant stress on part of the king as well to show the indispensability of the wish, from which it is itself getting distantiated. So, on the one hand, we find that as a result of iniquitous redistribution of surplus, the Kshatriyas are becoming more and more prosperous in material terms, and there is some kind of economic distanciation vis-a-vis the Vaishyas, the general producers, the common direct producers who are contributing to these offerings, which have become coercive now. But at the same time, they have not been able to amass that much of wealth or material surplus to the extent that they can dispense with the wish altogether or the Vaishyas altogether. So, in ritual terms, there is this constant reiteration of the indispensability of the Vaishyas in these later Vedic hymns. So, there is this kind of a, you can say, two tangents that we get to see in the religion of later Vedic times, and it is the overall context of the changes in the later Vedic times which takes us to that stage where this severing of the relationship in a complete way, to the extent that we can consider the Varna society as stratified, as separately stratified society, vertically stratified society, but that is something which became a characteristic feature of the post-Vedic times. So, up to the later Vedic times, this is how we need to understand the changes in the realm of polity, religion, society and economy as such.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for in fact summing up this whole series that we've been having, talking about the Vedic times early to the later. So with this, friends, we would like to take your leave, but we have of course more to talk about in the history section, which we shall be coming with in the next few lectures. So thank you so much, sir, for being here and being associated with us. Thank you, friends. Have a great day.